Tomorrow, the trial resumes for the woman accused of murdering her husband and then burying him in the backyard in Lake County. Today, there were several surprises in court. Lori Shaver took the stand in her own defense.
A Lake County woman accused of killing her former husband listened today as her current husband was called to the stand by prosecutors. Now, the second-degree murder of Michael Shaver has Lori Shaver facing a jury. West News' Dave McDaniel is live at the courthouse right now where the testimony.
For nearly 3 years, she convinced everyone her husband had simply disappeared. Friends believed her. Police believed her. Even Facebook posts from his account made it seem like he was still alive somewhere out there. But buried beneath a concrete fire pit in her own backyard was a secret prosecutors say she spent years carefully protecting. And the moment a medical examiner took the stand, the entire story she built began collapsing right in front of the jury. Michael and Lori Shaver looked like a couple slowly drifting apart, still living together while quietly dating other people. By late 2015, their marriage was already unraveling behind closed doors. Then Michael suddenly vanished without a trace. No calls, no bank activity, no contact with family or friends. But while everyone searched for answers, Lori kept telling different stories about where he went, until investigators uncovered something horrifying buried beneath her property in Clermont, Florida. At first, Michael Shaver's disappearance didn't look like murder. It looked like a broken marriage finally collapsing. By November 2015, Michael and Lori Shaver were still living together on their 5-acre property in Clermont, Florida. But the relationship was already unraveling behind closed doors. Friends later described a tense household where both of them had started seeing other people while still trying to maintain some version of family life. Then, almost overnight, Michael vanished. The last confirmed sighting of him came on November 7th, 2015, when he attended a local tractor show with family members and a co-worker named Frank Merritt. Merritt later testified he noticed tension between Michael and Lori that day, but nothing alarming enough to predict what was coming. Just days later, Michael suddenly stopped showing up for work at Disney. At first, co-workers assumed something personal had happened. Then Frank Merritt received a text message from Michael's phone claiming he was quitting his job to save his marriage. The message sounded strange. Concerned, Merritt drove directly to the Shaver home to check on him personally. But Michael never came to the door. Instead, Lori greeted him and calmly explained that Michael had left her and disappeared voluntarily. According to her, she had no idea where he went. That explanation would become the foundation of everything that followed, because after November 2015, Michael Shaver essentially disappeared from the face of the earth. No bank activity, no verified sightings, no calls to family, no contact with friends, nothing. And yet somehow his social media accounts remained active. Facebook messages continued appearing from Michael's account. Friends received updates suggesting he wanted to be left alone and had started a new life somewhere else. Some people were told he moved to Georgia. Others heard New York. Some even believed he was in California. Every version of the story changed depending on who asked, but investigators would later discover one detail that changed the entire case. The Facebook activity wasn't coming from Michael. It was coming from Lori's own internet connection. Every post, every message, every digital sign suggesting Michael was alive was traced back to the same IP address connected to the Shaver home. And suddenly what looked like a missing person case started looking far more sinister. But Lori didn't stop there. As months passed, prosecutors say she carefully dismantled Michael's entire life piece by piece. She sold his guns, work equipment, vehicles, and personal belongings. Witnesses later testified they purchased firearms directly from her after Michael disappeared. At the same time, Michael's bank accounts were drained. Loans were taken out in his name. And according to prosecutors, Lori continued creating new lies to explain why nobody could reach him. To some people, Michael had become unstable. To others, he was traveling. To others, he was intentionally avoiding his family. Every explanation was carefully designed to stop people from asking more questions. Then came the mistake that prosecutors believe exposed everything. By that point, Lori had started an affair with a married man named Jeremy Townsend. at some point during that relationship. Prosecutors say she used Michael's identity one more time in an act fueled by jealousy. Flowers were delivered to Jeremy's wife. Attached was a handwritten note signed Mike. The message accused both spouses of cheating and instructed Jeremy's wife to check her Facebook messages. But investigators later discovered the flowers were paid for using Lori's own bank account, and the timing horrified detectives because by then, Michael had already been missing for more than 2 years, yet someone was still using his identity as if he were alive. That was the moment people closest to Michael finally stopped believing the stories. One of his childhood friends, Scott Amatuccio, became deeply suspicious after realizing nobody had physically seen Michael since 2015. In February 2018, he contacted the Lake County Sheriff's Office and requested a welfare check at the Shaver property. Deputies arrived and began looking around the home. At first, Lori cooperated, but the moment investigators started moving toward the backyard, everything changed. When detectives returned to the Shaver property with a search warrant, investigators focused immediately on the backyard. Something about the area stood out: a strange concrete slab, a fire pit, and beneath it, a visible depression in the ground that investigators later described as roughly the size of a human body. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the property. Then investigators started digging 3 feet underground, beneath layers of concrete and dirt. They uncovered Michael Shaver's skeletal remains wrapped in a fitted sheet and tarp fastened together with straps. He had been buried in his own backyard for more than 2 years, and according to the medical examiner, Michael suffered a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. That discovery destroyed the image Lori had spent years creating. The missing husband who walked away had never left at all. Prosecutors argued this wasn't panic, it was planning. A body wrapped carefully, buried deep underground, covered with concrete specifically designed to conceal it. Then came the trial in 2024. And at first, the defense appeared to gain momentum. Lori's attorneys painted a very different picture for the jury. They claimed Michael had been violently abusive for years, physically, emotionally, and sexually. According to the defense, everything exploded during a violent confrontation on the back porch in May 2016. Then came the moment nobody inside that courtroom forgot. Lori's daughter, now 15 years old, took the stand, and she testified that when she was only 7 years old, she saw Michael attacking her mother. She claimed she grabbed a gun from her mother's bedroom and shot her father to save Lori's life. The courtroom sat in stunned silence, a teenager confessing she shot her own father as a child. It was emotional, powerful, and for a moment it seemed like the defense had given the jury a reason to doubt everything prosecutors claimed. But then the medical examiner took the stand, and the entire defense theory started collapsing in real time. Because according to the physical evidence, Michael Shaver suffered only one gunshot wound. That finding became devastating for the defense. Why? Because their version of events depended on 2 separate shots. The daughter supposedly fired first. Then Jeremy Townsend, Lori's boyfriend, allegedly arrived afterward and fired a second fatal shot before helping hide the body. But the medical examiner confirmed there was no second gunshot wound, no second trajectory. No evidence supporting 2 shooters. The bones themselves contradicted the story. And prosecutors immediately connected that contradiction to everything else the jury had already seen. The fake Facebook messages, the shifting stories, the drained bank accounts, the flowers signed with Michael's name, the body hidden beneath concrete poured in the backyard. Then prosecutors delivered another crushing blow. A neighbor testified she remembered a terrible smell coming from the Shaver property months before the concrete was poured. According to her testimony, the odor lingered long enough for family members to notice it repeatedly. That detail mattered enormously because the defense claimed Michael died in May 2016, but the smell was already there before that, meaning the body had likely already been buried long before the defense's timeline ever began. One by one, the prosecution dismantled every explanation, and when Lori finally testified herself, Prosecutors pressed her about the missing financial activity, the conflicting timelines, and the impossible gaps in her story. Michael's bank records showed virtually nothing after November 2015. No purchases, no withdrawals, no evidence he lived independently anywhere. For jurors, the picture becoming clear was terrifying. A man vanished. His identity continued being used for years, his body hidden beneath his own backyard, while a completely different story was fed to everyone around him. Finally, after deliberation, the jury reached its decision. Lori Shaver was found guilty of second-degree murder with a firearm. Then, in November 2024, the judge sentenced her to life in prison. The woman who smiled confidently through much of the trial, the woman prosecutors say spent years controlling every loose end, would spend the rest of her life behind bars. And perhaps the most haunting part of this case is how long the truth stayed buried, literally beneath concrete, while people around her believed Michael had simply disappeared. Because sometimes the most dangerous lies aren't told in panic. They're maintained carefully, for years. If you found this case disturbing, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deeply researched true crime courtroom stories. And after hearing all the evidence in this case, do you believe investigators would have ever discovered Michael Shaver if that backyard had never been searched for?